to the conversation. Hey, this is the eGathering podcast where we get together each week. This year is Rick Coop, and I am Todd Brown, and we talk about our matters of our religion, matters of our faith, how our life is going, and we walk through different parts of what this Christian faith is all about. We feel like it was a hole in the podcast world, where it's just a conversation about how we walk through this thing. And so this week we're inviting along with us in a new way through Zoom, Mr. Dallas Tharp. Dallas is a minister at Elkhart Northside Church of the Nazarene in Elkhart, Indiana, and an old friend. But he started something new. Dallas, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So we got the idea of talking to Dallas because he is working through a new avenue of ministry, and that avenue of ministry is through gaming. And so we wanted to talk to him and let him talk through what that looks like. Dallas, so give us an idea of who you are, where you're at, and what you've got going on.
So I'm Dallas Tharp. I grew up actually in Muncie. I attended Muncie Southside for pretty much all of my adolescence and developmental times. Got a call into ministry, went to Olivet Nazarene University to study youth ministry. Met my wife, Kristen, there. And then we graduated and went to Kansas City after being in Arkansas. And then I got a master's degree, and then we started having kids. And so we have 4 kids. Our oldest is 10, or soon to be 10, an 8-year-old, our son, and then a 6-year-old soon to be 7, and then a 5-year-old. So they all keep us pretty busy, but that's ministry and life. You know, ministry's taken us all over the place. We've been Kansas City, Illinois, Arkansas, New Hampshire, Kansas, now back to Indiana. So glad to be back on my home district.
So again, we want to always applaud the ministry spouses who follow people all over the country, because that's where God calls you, right?
Yep.
And so when we started talking about this, we heard that you were doing something, I guess we would call a gaming ministry. And then so that's intriguing, because I think as Nazarenes, one of the things that one of the early Nazarene things, or when we went through this weird stage in the 60s and 70s, gaming was verboten pretty much of any kind, and thought to be a bad thing. And then I hear gaming ministry, and I think, what are you guys doing up there? Gaming ministry. What is that, and what does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, I think, part of the Church of the Nazarene, we just used to not just know how to have fun. I always joke that we used to have the statement about not dancing, not because we thought dancing was wrong, just because we were all terrible at it. And so we're like, let's just cover our bases here.
Yeah, that's probably
it. But for me, gaming ministry is not just online gaming, but really being able to create a space for people to come together. We're called Game&Table because we like the idea of people being able to come together around the table and play games together, live life together, get to know each other, build these real relationships with each other, instead of just, kind of this facade that, we've trained people to kind of put on with each other, whether it's at church or whether it's in these other social situations where, somebody asks you how you're doing, you're like, I'm fine, but, you're not really getting down to the heart of it. And so gaming ministry is video games, tabletop games, board games, card games. I know.
Yeah.
There's probably some old school Nazarene that probably hears your podcast and is like, oh man, that kid is going to hell. Like,
yeah.
But
yeah, we can walk through that. I mean, someone will demonstrate for you why each of the cards in a deck of cards is evil. But so when we talk about where did this idea come from? What launched this idea for you guys?
Yeah, so this idea came from, really partially just out of my own passion of loving to play games and desiring connection for myself. But from my experience in youth ministry, and also as a all kinds of different ministries that I've been able to do, I've done children's ministries, youth ministries, senior pastorate. Um, just seeing that desire of people looking for those connecting spaces, and so having this passion about this idea, being inspired by other people who are doing similar things, um, being able to take an opportunity and say, hey, competitive like e-gaming is a huge industry that's growing. Tabletop conventions, all these board game conventions, these things are huge. I mean, probably a lot of people know about like the idea of like if you say Comic Con, like San Diego Comic Con's like a huge thing that people, whether you have ever attended it, but at least of the name of people being interested in like anime and comic books and cosplay stuff. And so being able to kind of tap into that world and say, hey, like um the world around us is telling us that like play is very important to development throughout life. And so why are we not also using gaming and play for our spiritual development? And so that's really the heart of it for me.
Yeah.
Was if we can talk about discipleship and spiritual development through avenues of gaming and play, like it just seems human nature to me. So
I think it's really cool. For some reason, I keep going back to the COVID era that we went through, and people were so separated from each other. I mean, we had to stay in our homes, and then you had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and people at the schools were closed down, and people had to just stay in their homes. There wasn't a lot of community going on. And we have a generation of people who that was uncomfortable to get back out in the public again. But what you're doing is using this to create a community where people are getting back together and doing things and like you said with play, I just read an article recently that talked about that very thing, that, you have to have play, you have to have downtime, you have to have family time, not just work, 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 which is what our age group was used to.
So I think of something about you and Mary, your wife, that is interesting. And then I read later about it being something good for marriage was gameplay.
Yeah,
you guys play games outside of having couples over, but you two will play a video game or play a card game or play.
We still have the old Wii.
Different video games together. It's a way of getting distracted and yet spending some time together and laughing and being silly for a minute.
Yeah, I think what they've done is a great idea. Yeah. So if you don't mind, go into that detail a little bit. What would a time look like? When you get together, what days you get together, and what does that look like when you guys are together?
Yeah. So we officially launched on September 7th, and we had a big launch party. And so we had I had several kind of like game masters, dungeon masters come in to lead some different games. Had people kind of doing check-in, overseeing video games, our game library kind of check out. But yeah, so our typical gathering times are Fridays and Saturdays. We meet from 4 to 9 p.m. and it's set up as kind of a come when you want, leave when you need to kind of thing. So if you want to come at 4 o'clock and stay till 9 o'clock, you're welcome to do that. Like if that's the space that you need. If you're busy and you're like, hey, I can only make it for like an hour, that's fine too. It's just trying to create that space for people to feel this is a comfortable, safe place for me to be in. So we meet Fridays and Saturdays, like I said, 4 to 9 p.m. Every other week. So we try to have it basically twice a month. So a total of 4 sessions in the month. So you could come to one of them. You could come to all of them. You could say my schedule's really busy and maybe next month I'll catch up with it. But it's been really cool to kind of see the engagement of people showing up to that. And what we do is it's one of those things that you show up and make sure that you're greeted when you come in the door, so you already feel welcomed when you come in. And then you're welcome to grab a snack or a drink. So we do that on like a donation basis. Like we have things that have been donated and purchased through ministry funds. But then if people want to donate, we don't charge for our snacks and stuff, but we do ask if people want to donate towards that, they can do that as well, to kind of support that. But we've encouraged people, like, you don't have to feel like, oh, you have to run home to go get your dinner. Like, you can bring something with you and again, have that meal together around the table. But then it's pretty much, for a lot of it, it's open time of, if you've got people who want to play a Dungeons and Dragons game, if we've got one of our DMs there, they can do that. I'm also learning how to be a DM, so that's kind of a fun experience for me too. That's not something I ever thought that I would say, that, I get paid in ministry to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons. So that's kind of a fun little twist with this. But it's, bring your own games if you want. Like, if there's something that we don't have that you're like, this is like a favorite game of mine, and you want to share that with other people. Because again, I mean, I feel like that's a vulnerability where you're able to bring people into, this is something that I really care about, and I want to share that with other people. But yeah, you can grab a game.
Again, being able to look each other in the eyeball and play these games. I think that's something that went away and was getting worse and worse and worse and worse, because there are people who have thousands of friends on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or whatever the social of the day is, but they really don't look anybody in the eyeball or touch anybody's hand and shake hands or laugh together. It's quick one-word quips back and forth, or one sentence or one paragraph quips back and forth, and being able to look somebody in the eyeball sure makes a difference.
So this isn't just one. Go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, like, with our video game side of it, it's that same kind of thing. Like, you're not just playing by yourself, and you're not just getting mad at a situation. Like, we're talking about real life things where it's like, you can't just rage quit. You can't just throw a controller when things don't go the way that you want to. Like, we're helping kids and adults to learn how to lose gracefully and win gracefully as well too.
Awesome. So this is like role-playing games, board games, video games. It's a mix of different things.
Yep.
Okay.
All kinds of different stuff. Yeah.
Who comes to these things?
So we are open to all ages. So we've tried to even got like Minecraft on our game systems, because that's really popular with old and young. And so we've tried to kind of craft kind of some opportunities for even younger kids. So my youngest is 5. She was playing in a Super Smash Brothers tournament last night. She doesn't really know what she's doing, but she has a whole lot of fun while she's doing it. So we tried to kind of craft that and also have some games for younger kids as well. But I mean, it's all ages. I mean, it's open to everybody. Our target audience of what we're specifically crafting for is youth and young adults, trying to, again, create that space where, there's not a lot of just opportunities for them to go and feel wanted in places, even places that, as a teenager that were available to me, a lot of those spaces are being taken away, unfortunately, because some people have, not respected or abused those spaces. Like, I remember as a teenager, like, we used to go hang out at the mall and just walk around the mall. And, a lot of times malls are now kind of restricting that, you need to have adult supervision or whatever. And, rightfully so, but, there's just not a lot of spaces for youth and young adults to be able to just come and hang out. That's not like a school setting, or for young adults, like, that's not like a bar setting or a restaurant setting. That doesn't feel like, hey, like, in order to be here, you have to go spend a bunch of money. So trying to create that space for those that are, especially economically and financially, just not able to do as many things, creating that space for those as well.
how does this transition into ministry?
Yeah, that's a question that we get a lot, because it's like, okay, so you sit around and play games. Like, I mean, I could do that too. Like, it's not just about sitting down and playing the games. It's about building life together. It's about, like you said, looking people in the eye and having those conversations. I had a gentleman at our launch party, who is atheistic in nature, and we were having this conversation, and we were talking about all kinds of different stuff, and he was just like, he's like, I'm so glad that, like, we can sit here and we can have different opinions and we can have this conversation, and we're not like fighting with each other, but we can just have this conversation. And he said, and I noticed you have a rather large cross over there in the corner of your room, but at the same time, nobody's beating me in the head with that cross. And so being able to kind of create that space where you can recognize that this is a faith community, it is a religious space. And, we're going to have probably some God conversations. We're not just gonna, we're not just gonna have whatever you want to have happen. And then being able to have conversations about real life consequences. So things like through tabletop gaming, you learn about these real life situations and consequences. You learn how to interact with other people. And so I think for us, understanding that that's a spiritual discipline of learning how to do these things. How do you spend time together? How do you build these relationships? How do you talk about in a way that doesn't feel like you're kind of forcing Jesus down people's throats? How do you feel like you actually talk about what Jesus actually modeled for us? Because again, I mean, you look at what Jesus did, right? He spent his time doing what the people around him did. And it wasn't that in doing that, Jesus got changed to just act like those other people. Every person that Jesus spent time with ended up changed because of being in relationship to Jesus being with them in their setting.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he says, you made fun of John because he didn't eat or drink, but now you make fun of me because I do eat and drink with these people. You call me a glutton and a drunkard, as they say. I think I was just reading. They're flustered with him as he sits at Zacchaeus' table. How's come your boss is sitting with these tax collectors and prostitutes and all of these people? And it's because when he does that, he is being invited into their life and into their heart. And during these times, I have to suspect that if there are people who have come to your gaming nights over and over and over again and been exposed to you and been exposed to other Christian people who are a part of your church, that when they have a problem, then they know they can come to you. You've now opened that door. Oh, Pastor Dallas is a regular dude, and I can talk to him about these things. And I know him, and I know his family, and I know how he walks and talks. They know you as genuine, I guess.
Yeah.
And gaming is an opportunity.
Yeah, and especially for me, one of those things that I specifically do, and I know for some pastors, like, this is going to seem really hard. I don't introduce myself as Pastor Dallas. Like, sure. I just introduce myself as Dallas. Yeah. And because what I don't want is to people feel like that becomes a barrier that we can't overcome. Mm-hmm. Right? That my goal of talking to you is, okay, I'm like, I've got you on my checklist now. Like, I'm going to make sure you're saved. I'm going to make, like, I want to build an authentic relationship with you. And I want my people who are also a part of this, who are volunteering, and I mean, just people building these relationships with each other, but having, again, the oversight to it, to, recognizing, hey, there's a kid sitting over there playing Minecraft by himself. Like, somebody go sit down and just start talking to them. Ask them about their day. Ask them about what's going on in life. And as they're playing, like, you could just talk about life. And it doesn't have to be like this creepy thing where we're like, oh, well, like, I can't go talk to a teenager, or I can't go talk to a kid because, somebody might think. I'm like, no, like in this space, like, I mean, yeah, we're still keeping a mindful eye on that kind of stuff, but in this space, like, you should feel more comfortable to say, like, hey, yeah, let's sit down at this table and let's play this game, and let's talk about the things that you care about.
That makes it
You
safe.
know,
That's part of what
11-year
makes
old.
it safe, Dallas, is they got to feel like they can bring their kid or they can be in this group of people, and there are enough people here, and we're together in a room, and it makes it safe and it makes it okay to go through those things. And go let that kid whoop you at Minecraft, and then maybe he'll want to talk some more.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring up an elephant in the room for some people. You mentioned Dungeons and Dragons a couple of times, and I know that there are some folks who may have some problems with that. And a while back when we all talked, you mentioned something where you received an actual letter about that. Can you bring that? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a question that I get a lot because, again, the stigmas of, hey, that's not something the church does. We don't play card games. We don't, we don't smoke or chew or go with girls that do, right? Like, all these old, sayings. Which, I mean, some of them are obviously, there's good benefit to them. But some of these things, like, I think we as a church just became so reactionary to things of the world, and we just said no, no, no. Instead of trying to understand it, we're just going to isolate from it. And reality is, understanding that not necessarily all of these things are always the best tools, but at the same time, like, the fact that God has given us resources to be able to think about things in different ways, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've often talked about, with the reason we have 4 different gospels is because people needed to hear those stories in different ways because it connected with them in different
Yes,
ways. We all have our own individual journeys, and so somebody who's experienced life in a different way than me doesn't mean that their journey with God is better or worse than mine, but it gives us all this bigger picture of what God is like. And so for me, I had a person that was like, hey, I don't really understand this game. I don't really know much about Dungeons and Dragons, but can you explain what the game is? And can you tell me how that matches with our Nazarene beliefs? And then, especially then as a faith community as well. And so I said, at its core, Dungeons and Dragons is a role playing game, which means it allows its players to use their imagination, engage in situational awareness and choices, and learning how to deal with consequences of said choices. In this aspect, while there is fantasy involved, this mirrors a journey of discipleship and walk with God. D&D also serves as an escape mechanism for many who feel overwhelmed, anxious, or other trauma, and offers a place to explore and experience in a safe way and place. This matches 100% with our Nazarene doctrine on how we think about and minister to those around us. At the end of the day, it's not just about the game being played, but about the life and the journey of those at the table with you. You must learn to work together, and through your journey, you grow closer together.
So as you speak about that, I'm reminded of the Lord of the Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien. And a lot of people don't know that Tolkien was a Christian man, and that whole concept for him was around the concept of Christ and working together towards the goal and the vision and fighting against dark and moving towards light and all of the pieces. And if you don't know, you should go back and read Tolkien and his concept. His son does a very good job of explaining it. But just because there are dungeons and dragons and wizards and orcs and all these things, it doesn't mean that it isn't. In fact, so much of what comes from Dungeons and Dragons, as far as I'm concerned, comes from the mind of Tolkien and the characters that he created. So this Christian man who created this world, we learn through stories, right?
Yeah.
Jesus spoke,
and even Yeah. And even C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia, right? Like there's great analogies there with like the White Witch and talking about the magic that she uses, and Aslan's journey, and Aslan talking about the old magic and talking about, you know, what's really at the heart of his salvation moment for the people. So there's a lot of really cool things. So when you start really digging into this, there's really some good biblical arguments that can be made through this too. So
It's sad when I think you said it so well, when you say we, out of fear for good reason, fear of the darkness and fear of the principalities of the night, out of fear of those things, so many groups, many denominations, so many different Christian groups started closing doors. And I think that, frankly, I think that works into Satan's preference. If you ever read, speaking of C.S. Lewis, if you ever read the Screwtape Letters, yeah, sure, just keep closing those doors, and then people aren't exposed to you. I love this idea.
Keep them occupied with all these other things that don't matter.
I love this idea of you guys sitting together and walking life together. I get this vision of somebody who isn't necessarily a believer, and saying, hey, I'm going to move this weekend, and you guys are helping them to move. Hey, my mom died, and I'm really having a hard time with this, and you guys getting it. You opened a door, and now that door is open. The communication is back and forth, and they see you have a tough time with things. They see you have a good time with things. They know you as a person. I just go back to me, that was Jesus' way of ministry, being with people that he shouldn't be with, and combining that with people that they should be with. So how can I think of a conversation we had before, and I do kind of. So when we talk about game leaders, and you'd mentioned Comic-Con, I don't think people know that there's a Gen Con. This gaming thing is gone off the rails. There's so many people involved. There's actually a convention. One of them is in Indianapolis at Gen Con, where people. I had a friend who said, I said, what are you doing this weekend? He said, well, I'm a game master at Gen Con. A gaming company has hired me, and I'm running 4 tables, being a game master. And I'm like, that's a thing? You go somewhere and you lead games for a living? So yeah, it is really taken off. How do you guys get dungeon masters that you've dealt with, or game leaders, and are you keeping that within the faith, or are you just opening? Is that also people you're ministering to, or those dungeon masters?
It's a little bit of both. We've got some people who have a faith background who have run some stuff for us, but we actually had one gentleman that came. He's connected through one of our local comic book stores / gaming stores, that he runs a D&D game. He actually runs 2 games on Saturdays. He runs one for kind of experienced players, and then he runs a very basic, like the basic starter pack introduction, like you've never played or played maybe one session, getting kind of the basics down of this. He came and ran a game for us during our launch party, and he had a great time. I mean, I think the oldest person at the table was him. And like, so of the players, I think the oldest one was probably like 16, and the youngest one was 9, my oldest daughter. And they were having a great time. Like, they were sitting at the table right behind me. And it was great because I actually said something to somebody. I was like, it's so fun to hear the storytelling going on over here of what they're experiencing, focusing on the game that I'm playing, and then hearing all these other things happening as well too. It was just such a great experience. But yeah, so that gentleman, his name's Tony, actually was telling us a story that when we got in contact with him about coming in and running a game for us, he said he hadn't been in church in about 20 years. And just he loved the idea of what we were doing, but just the very nature of like being asked to be a part of that, he felt like it was kind of the Holy Spirit kind of prompting him, like, hey, maybe I need to get back involved in church again.
Yeah.
And so I view that as I've written up kind of a description of like, here's kind of our expectation of our dungeon masters. Like, we don't do this. This is kind of where we try to keep our focus. And so, yeah, I view that as a discipleship tool as well, that if I can bring in somebody who maybe has a lot of experience, but they don't necessarily have any religious background, we can find ways to kind of begin having those conversations. Because again, there's so much middle ground there that we can find that commonality in.
So if people want to help, how can they help? What are your socials and those different things? How can they help you guys out?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook at Game&Table. I got a fun little logo with a game controller and a table. And so we're the only thing I think on Facebook called Game&Table. There's gaming tables. There's, all kinds of different stuff that you can find, but we are the only official Game&Table. If you have questions specifically, you can reach out to us at Elkhartgametable@gmail.com. And I'll make sure that you have all this stuff to be able to
I'll get those listed
on the screen, all that fun stuff. But we're also on TikTok and Instagram. We're working on trying to do some live streaming stuff, but we're working on a website as well, so you could try to find some of that more specific things. And then working on building like an Amazon list. So if you want to support us with donations or purchase us a game or snacks, because we give out snacks and stuff during our gatherings. And then
I think
prayer partners.
If they're in the Elkhart area, come play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So our schedule's also listed out on our Facebook page. We've got events listed for each of the days where we meet. We've got a big, if you don't have plans for New Year's and you want a safe place for doing something fun for New Year's, we've got gaming in the New Year's that we're going to do on New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. So yeah, all kinds of different stuff of just kind of gathering together. And at the end of the day too, my hope with this is that this is not just an Elkhart thing. I really do hope that this could be something that could go to any community. If you recognize that there's a need in your community for creating this kind of space. One of my personal goals for us in Elkhart is down the road that I would love to actually have our own individual space, because right now we're meeting at the youth space of Elkhart Northside. I would love for us to actually have a space that's somewhat close to either our high school or one of our middle schools.
Yeah.
To where it could be an after school hangout space where we're open, on a regular basis, where you have games available, you have a coffee shop, you have people who can come in and help with tutoring or mentoring, and just really creating this space that just feels like it really is just such a comfortable place where you can deal with the things of life and we can be partners with you in this.
I like that idea. Okay, so you would be open to other folks in ministry getting a hold of you and walking through maybe doing what you're doing?
Yep, absolutely.
I think the more I listen to you, the more I'd love to see a Game&Table be a part of a bigger thing, So there's Game&Table on Facebook, but then maybe Game&Table Muncie, Game&Table Chicago, Game&Table Idaho. So that'd be great. Dallas, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending time with us. I know that there are other things you can do with your Saturday morning, so we appreciate you coming around.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Hey, guys, thank you for joining us. If you stuck around this long, you either love us or hate us, maybe even just kind of sort of like us. If you like it, would you just hit that like button? I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're or follow, depending on the place that you're catching us at. And so we appreciate you spending some time with us. Bye-bye.